I'm doing this with right now. I think he feels a little bit bypassed or something. I don't know.
What do you mean? He's not included in this?
No, like I like I have trouble talking about my feelings with him and like what's going on inside of me, and I also have this sort of belief. I don't know if it's true, but that he's super skeptic about all this stuff like inner child work and stuff. He's not. He has a different perspective on these things. So sometimes I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
a partner can have, of course, different approaches to deal with certain things in life. Instead of inner child work, what does he think would improve communication and intimacy?
Yeah, just do it. like Nike.
And if we could just do it, he doesn't think we would just do it.
Yeah, maybe not. I think he's, yeah, I don't know. I think like uh like I'm very lucky in the way that I think I've had a more troubled childhood, and he had like a really, I think, yeah, for what it's worth, like a good upbringing, like a safe detachment style. So he's very like a lot more light on his feet and easygoing, and he just like sports and stuff, and then things will work out and just la la la. So it's yeah, and for me, he hasn't. Yeah, so he's more pragmatic and
Yeah. But it's sometimes easier for people who themselves have not experienced something to, yeah, to dismiss it. Like for people born in rich white countries, it can be very easy to speak about Africa, like, oh, just get over yourself. It's like that's not really how it works. But yeah, in that sense, definitely you're doing it for yourself first and foremost. So yeah.
how are you guys?
Let's close our eyes. Mm. Take a couple of deep and slow breaths. And give ourselves permission to fully be here, fully be present. Let all the thoughts and things and worries and obligations of the day just wash away. Take a moment to acknowledge yourself for doing inner work, for showing up here tonight. For a moment, just be with yourself. Feel yourself. Hold yourself. It's usually not so much that we suffer from a lack of self-love, but simply a lack of tuning in with ourselves, being present with ourselves. Acknowledge that each and every single one of us has their inner work to do in whichever way they choose to do it. and that having work to do doesn't mean that we are broken or defective. Simply means we're growing up. Take a moment only to appreciate yourself, not for anything in particular, just appreciate yourself. And if you feel resistance coming in, or you're trying to appreciate yourself, hear your voice, yes, I want to feel grateful for that. Include it in your appreciation. You were rude to someone today, still appreciate yourself. You were less than perfect, still appreciate yourself. You could have done something better, still appreciate yourself. And slowly, when you feel like it, come back.
Quick question, Maya. Is there any chance you can do something with your microphone maybe? Because I don't know how is it for you, Lotte, but for me it's sometimes...
Yeah, for me too. I couldn't hear some parts.
They're really hard to understand. I'm trying to fill in the gaps, but I'm not getting the full picture.
Is this better?
I guess you'll just have to keep on talking.
Yeah.
Let's try it for a moment, because I had my music, my phone nearby. Is this better? Any better?
Maybe.
Now maybe, but it's also, it seems like the internet is a little bit, I don't know whether you have different internet connections or not. But
So,
yeah.
Is this better?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Better.
So this kind of sucks for me because then I don't have you on my speaker, but yeah, it's fine. All right. Yeah, and I just also wanted to say, like, I'm so proud of us, of you guys, for doing this work. Can really tell the past weeks have been very intense for a lot of people. Like, it can be traced back to a lot of influences, but yeah, just have extra compassion for yourself these days. So, do we have pen and paper close by?
Yep.
Yeah. We're going to take a little trip down to memory lane. So I'll give you guys really some time to drop in, to retrieve some stuff. I will guide you through some of it, but I will also give you space for writing. So there's a lot to do these days, you know, with the power of now, living in the moment, unconditional love, we are all one, and so on and so forth. What these kinds of teachings seem to forget is that you carry your past with you to the here and now if you don't solve it. Your unconscious doesn't let go of things. Your inner child doesn't grow beyond a certain age if you don't revisit what happens in those moments. Your body, your physical body, stores emotions. Your brain stores pathways. Your body is conditioned to certain chemical responses. And beyond that, your etheric bodies, your feeling body also holds energetic patterns. So everything we do not resolve, we simply carry it with us. So our past is literally with us in each present moment. No matter how much you meditate, no matter how much you try and just get over it, we need to go through it. So with your notebook, I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to start making an inventory. Inventory, sorry. Of your relationships. If you've only had one relationship, for example, then you can stay within this one. But try and write down as many of your relational experiences as you can. Just retrieve them for a moment. Maybe just name the people for yourself. You can write down some names. If it's just one or two, then maybe it's not necessary. But write down some names of, and whether they were significant relationships or short-lived, doesn't really matter. And then go back inside. And now you're going to scan. See what the similarities were between these men. And I'm not talking about obvious things, more subtle, emotional, feeling things. See how many things you can pick out. So instead of things like these two men were artists or these two men were athletes or women, I would look for things like these two or three were loners. These were workaholics. These traveled all the time. What did they have in common? These were very insecure. These were completely over the top, self-assured. Some were emotionally unavailable, maybe where others were not. Maybe some of these men, some of these people wanted a relationship, maybe others didn't. Maybe some of them wanted completely different things out of life. Maybe some were very extroverted or introverted. Popular, not popular. Very feminine, very masculine. So, and remember, you can always, and I actually would really recommend it to go more in depth into this exercise this coming week, because this is how we really learn a lot about our traumas, our woundings, our subconscious, our patterns. So the next thing we're going to do, still with the same, list of partners, we're going to retrieve, we're going to decode, decipher what the relational pattern was. So you can think about things like, how did you guys meet? How did you guys enter into the relationship? What was the beginning of the relationship like? Was it very slow, very fast? Was it mostly through physical contact? Were you guys friends first? Was there intense, insane attraction? Or was it, like a slow simmering, a slow heating up? When did you guys decide to, move from friends to dating, from dating to relationship, stuff like that? How much time was there in between relationships? And what about the people that perhaps you never dated but had a crush on? Is there a pattern there? Who did most of the pursuing, them or you? Were there any games that were played by them or by you? And then how did the relationships progress? Were they long? Were they short? Were they intense? Were you guys living together or just dating? Did one of you want to move faster or slower than the other? Were you guys compatible? How and why did they end? Did any of you both withdraw? Did one of you both want more or less intimacy, physical and emotional, than the other? More or less quality time together? Did your relationship feel independent, codependent, interdependent? How open, honest, vulnerable, and transparent were you guys with one another? Did you stay longer or shorter in the relationship than in hindsight you maybe could have? And then we're going to the last subject for this inquiry, which is the emotional, the experiential feeling of the relationship. What were your biggest issues what caused you guys to fight? What caused you to feel whatever it is that you were feeling? What was missing or what was wrong, in your opinion? After the initial phase of the relationship, what stuff did you see that you were like, oh? What were their issues with you? And if you can, really like take a moment, close your eyes, go back briefly to each of these relationships and how you felt most of the time, both the good and the negative. Did you feel understood? Did you feel validated? Did you feel like you found your soulmate? Did you feel like it was a lot of work? Or did you feel like they could never give you what you wanted? Or they never understood you? What was the drama about? And drama can also just mean your internal drama, caused by the relationship, fueled by the relationship, brought out because of this relationship. Was there any jealousy from either side? Were there a lot of fights or no fights? How close were you guys? What was the thing that you liked, that you loved about them most? Why you were with them, basically? perhaps you're already starting to notice some patterns, some similarities. If we were to really be analytical, I'm pretty sure we could give little symbols and signs, and there would be so much overlap between all the partners and all the things. On the surface, it can sometimes look like such different individuals. But usually underneath, we will find we were either attracted to them for a similar reason, or we ended it for a similar reason, or we were fighting for a similar reason. These are the things that we were looking for. So now write down a few of the things that stood out to you, either emotionally or relationally or from the people, the persons themselves. What patterns can you deduct from this little research? Similarities, overlap. And maybe two of the persons were completely different, but your fights were about the same thing, or your way of entering the relationship were the same. Sometimes patterns are quite obvious the moment we lay them out, spell them out like this. It's just the universe keeping, presenting you over and over and over, with whichever is unresolved within you. And if we start to become more aware of what we create in our lives, of what we habitually do, then we don't have to stay on that hamster wheel for as long as we do. We can start to make changes. We can break certain patterns. But only with this conscious awareness and a willingness to ask ourselves what these patterns mean. What does it mean that I keep having this thing show up in my relationships? What does it mean that this thing keeps showing up in my relationships? Why does this make me feel the way that it does? And what can I do to change it? I used to think that it was enough to become more vigilant. If something happened in a relationship, I would be really like, oh, I really should not do that anymore. That was stupid. Instead of investigating, like, but why did that happen? Why did I co-create that with someone? What is my wounding in this? And how can I heal? How can I grow? How can I evolve past this wounding? Because if we knew better, we would. So, whoever would like to share something about this? Can also be typed, by the way, for whatever reason.
No, I can I can talk. I think I will go through the list of things that stood out.
Yeah.
That's some sort of a summary.
Could you come a little bit, because my speaker is not on, could you come a little bit closer to the mic, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe I will try either this or I'll put my earplugs in. It's maybe even better, because my voice is really low right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So in many cases, it was me. I look at the relationships now with a bit of a distance as me trying to save them. They were either loners or they had some psychological issues, and I was there too. I came to save them, and then eventually I would really feel not appreciated enough for putting so much hard work into, and then them not seeing that I'm here to save them and how much I'm helping them. With certain relationships, eventually after I would really check out and leave, the guy would be like, okay, now I understand the value. At least in one relationship, it was like that. He really changed after we broke up.
And can you give one or two quick examples of what that saving was about or looked like, or what they needed saving of?
So for example, one guy was addicted to weed. He was smoking weed was super excessively for about 5 years, and he was only playing games, and then went into deep depression because he realized he just lost 5 years of his life and had no friends. And he was just about kind of crawling out of his shell. And he, as a 25-year-old, didn't have sex yet with anyone, I think, or had like one sexual partner before and whatnot. So it was like quite a, let's say, a heavy case, like a very, very antisocial person. Then there was another guy that I actually found out later that he was he had schizophrenia, but he didn't tell me himself. I just found the pills in his kitchen. He never actually told me that he had schizophrenia.
And how does that, because so you did not really enter the relationship knowing.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know that, but this is something where I have a couple of other relationships where I didn't know there was something psychological going on there. But there was another guy who actually, I met him when he was dressed up as a soldier. And as a soldier, he was supposed to be an army guy. And his whole story was that he's in the army. And he managed to convince me and 5 other friends of mine that he's a 20-year-old soldier. He told us everything about his missions to Afghanistan. He really had everything completely checked. So we all believed him. I had him over for dinners with my friends.
This was not with schizophrenia?
No, that was a different one.
Jesus
And
God.
he was not a soldier.
I've never heard of something like, I mean, I've seen it in movies.
Yeah, my dating life's definitely worth a Hollywood
I thought mine was interesting.
So then after I uncovered his identity is not a soldier, he turned up in front of my door dressed as a fireman. And he said, okay, I'm not a soldier, but I am a fireman.
Oh my God, where do you find this?
No way.
No.
What?
And he was 21, not 28, but he really looked like 28. He was super smart.
And what kind of disorder did you think this was?
I managed to find some friends of his that then explained to me that he was really abused as a kid. With his father kicked him out of the house when he was 13. He lived on the streets. He's seen his mom dying she had the brain tumor, and so she also got really disformed head, and she wouldn't recognize him anymore. And he got super traumatized as a kid. And instead of getting some sort of a treatment, his own father kicked him out on the streets. And his father was a soldier, so he tried to live up to his father's.
And question: since quite a few of these relationships you entered into, okay, guys with some psychological problems. So yes, you were the savior, but you didn't know that. So how do you think that happened? How do you think you got that far into a relationship not knowing these things? And I'm not saying like you should have. Trust me, I've had plenty of situations like where I was like, "How did I not see this?"
Yeah.
But that is
So,
the reflection.
this is more the feedback I got from a lot of my friends was that I just completely oversee very clear red flags. I'm much better right now, but it's also because I take a bit more time. Most of these relationships were started from a fling, or we would meet in the bar and then we're quite drunk and then we sleep together and then we just keep on having sex for another 2-3 weeks and they're like, okay, let's give this a try. And then along the way you start realizing all these things about that person that you didn't know. So that was actually mostly really this jump start of like just jumping into the cold water and
So red flag.
a lot, and then me just completely being oblivious, obviously because of the chemistry. You're not able to see those things, while my friends just be like, Simona, run away, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's perfect. So I guess that's one of the reasons that I wouldn't even inspect. I was just blinded immediately by the physical pleasures and not really able to even see those red flags.
And your friends, the ones that kind of could give you this very, very valuable feedback, could you also extract from them, like, how do you do the dating process? How do you prevent not seeing any red flags?
You mean how they do it?
Yeah. How are they able to sidestep red flags like that? But you are.
Most of my friends are in a very long relationships.
Yeah, but they started at some point. And when we enter relationships, we think like they might end up being.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard because they were most like 21, 22, 23. So it was the first love and then they just stayed together. Most of them, whereas I'm the one that has, like, if you said like write a couple of names down, and I'm looking at my list being like, Jesus Christ, just a long list.
Yeah, mine is a good list, I'd say. Yeah.
So
something that could really help for you in this process, you might inquire with a few friends that you know, and you can also you know, if all of your friends have completely like long-term relationship from high school, I don't know,
Yeah, not all of them,
widen
but
your
yeah.
circle a little bit. But the ones that have successful relationships, at least in terms where you're lacking, not necessarily a relationship that you would want, but ask them like, how did you guys do that? How did you know, like what things to look out for, or how did you sidestep red flags with people? Because how do we learn if we ourselves have never done this?
Yeah, no.
You know, doing the inner work, but also checking in with others who do embody these qualities that we ourselves do not have. And then you, of course, piece it together with, well, you already had some self-reflection as to why.
No, I mean, I think looking now at how I started those relationships back then, it's already a very clear to me even. Um, I guess it's also just taking the time because, as I said, if it starts with sex, then you're not really even capable to see the red flags because you don't want to see them.
Yeah.
In the
Although
first
sex
place.
is definitely not the only thing that can get our chemicals going, especially for women. It's like, yes, sex makes us more attached, but love in general. So even if there is a very loving, intimate on other levels connection, those hormones will still be flying around. So
Yeah. And then I guess with a couple of relationships now, I can also recall that it already didn't feel right at the beginning, but I thought it was my problem. And the guys were fairly manipulative, so they managed to turn it around and confirm that belief in me because I was already doubting myself anyway, so it was very easy for them, I think. And so I kept on continuously saying, what's wrong with me? Why, because they said, this is how it is. This is normal. This is how relationships are. They're many times much older. So I was looking up to them as, of course, they know I have no idea. And so that was the dynamic then. They were always in control, and I was the one that was the childish one that doesn't know how this works, doesn't know how life works.
What I hear from that would be lack of self-trust and self-confidence, and weaker boundaries for sure.
Yeah. And then I guess also with the sex, I think there's also this like very strong theme across all the relationships, but it's mostly me being the giving one and not on the receiving end. Sorry?
Of sex?
Yeah, so I think if I especially look at like the dynamics there, then it was mostly just like me giving blowjobs to the guys whenever I wasn't my period. It was be like, okay, blowjob week. You're just gonna have blowjobs every day, so that they would not, It was really just this like giving, and setting my value in the relationship through sex, actually. So really, I see that now very clearly, actually.
And so if we take, for example, just these three things that we mentioned, bypassing of red flags, bypassing of boundaries, not having strong enough boundaries and self-trust, and more focus on giving rather than receiving. If we would tie these three together, if you take a moment with yourself, what could this cluster point towards?
I guess it somehow falls back to the fear of loneliness. So it's like I'm going to do things that I don't want to do, maybe, or I don't want to do things that don't feel right because if I don't do these things the way these guys tell me, then they're going to break up with me. I'm going to be alone again. So that's the fear of loneliness, I think.
And can you let yourself go to that feeling now for a moment? Try in whichever way to make that feeling as real as possible as you can in this moment. How does that feel?
A lot of anxiety.
Anxiety.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolute confusion in some moments, really just not knowing what's wrong, what's right, or what do I feel actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just feeling really stuffed into a tiny small cube. I don't know why those are the words that come right now, but it really feels like I was just stuffed into a small container and the lid was closed, so I wouldn't be allowed to come out of there. I was really not setting my own boundaries, but someone forcing me into something.
Really give that feeling some space. Breathe into it. Acknowledge it. And see if that feeling reminds you of something from way, way earlier in your life. If it connects to anything.
I guess there's some connection to my dad
Mm-hmm.
and our relationship we had when I was a child.
How did that feel overall? Or can you recall some moments that really left an impression on you feeling wise?
So he worked abroad and he was at home only once a month or once in 2 months. He wasn't home too much. Actually, there's one situation that just came into my mind. Maybe that's a good example. When he lived abroad he was supposed to go there for 1 year, and then eventually he stayed 20 years. So I didn't really grow up with him. And halfway through, actually quite early in, I think 4 years in, something just didn't feel right anymore. We were at home. He was always there. He was coming home less and less. And then I obviously the hero Simona I started spying on him. And I was listening to his phone calls when my mom wasn't at home, and I could speak Russian, so I would understand what he was talking about. And I could only hear his part of the story, but I figured he was calling with a lady. And so I wrote into my little notebook what I've had when he was calling with her, to then tell my mom the next day, because it was all about I love you, and it was very intense. And for me, I think I was 11, it was this really anxious, weird, dangerous feeling of okay, what is going on here. And I found out, so it was I felt like it was all in my hands. It's a huge sense of responsibility, and also just I have to tell my mom. And eventually I think you heard me or something, because I was about to go to my room, so I failed at my spying skills. And so he stood up and walked towards my room, and so I ran into my bed and pretended I was sleeping. What he did is that he laid next to me in my bed. Just for a while, I kept on pretending I sleep. He laid there for a good 5 minutes, and then just stood up and walked away. The next morning I woke up. I found a note on my table saying, "I really didn't think you were like that." And he said that he knew that I was listening to him, because he laid next to me to measure my heartbeat to see whether I was really sleeping or whether I was stressed. And so he kind of turned it around against me. And then I felt bad, so I felt like I didn't even have anything to do with the situation. Suddenly I was the one that was blamed because I was the bad kid or something. So that's the situation that came up now. for these like really intense anxiety feeling, because I really had that in that moment. I was very intense.
So close your eyes and go to that memory that you just described for us. And it's very interesting. We already picked out at least 3 things that are connected to your relationship patterns: anxiety, confusion, and men turning things around on you, and you just like, okay. So go to that memory and ask yourself how you would have rather had that situation turn out. And I'm not talking about your dad not potentially cheating, I guess, but what you would have needed as a kid in that situation to not have that anxiety, confusion, and the tables turned on you to make you take responsibility where there was none for you to take.
First thing that comes to mind is respect. I just feel like I was disrespected.
Mm-hmm. And how could you have gotten that respect in the way that you needed?
I think my dad talking directly to me instead of writing a stupid blaming note on my table and then completely dismissing so it was very passive aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of him being the adult and walking up to me being like, okay, do you want to talk? You've heard something, yesterday, or do you want to talk about what you've heard, or what do you think? Or it was obviously bigger than that, so I understand, but still, from the perspective of an adult, I would have expected him to initiate the discussion and hear me out instead of just point the finger at me.
It's interesting. Sorry, I just also had this image of, yeah, because you had this kind of savior responsibility built in from a young age, maybe from other things as well, but also from this, So with that memory, imagine your dad, or if that feels too forced, you can imagine an intermediary person, perhaps your mother, perhaps a parental guide, a grandparent, a spirit guide, anything that works for you. Or you can even go to your younger self in that memory, whichever feels best to you, and give that little Simona what she needed, and really visualize it, imagine that scenario. And once you get a clear picture, maybe you want to share it with us.
So it's me walking up to my little self and giving myself a big hug.
Mm-hmm. Are you also giving her any words to soothe her, to help her understand, to help her see that it was not her fault?
Not really. I think it was more the hug. Because I feel like the closeness of my dad, because he laid next to me in the bed, was really inferior. He wasn't there out of love. He was there to inquire and misuse that information and blame me. So just to turn that situation into a hug instead, I think would actually be enough, I think.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, really let that sink in for a moment. Feel the comfort of that moment.
That feels very nice. Also, one thing that just recently started happening is whenever I have either a sort of a breakthrough or I concentrate, as you said, these exercises for, exercise self-love or imagine you're being loved by, the higher self, etc. I see this like strong magenta color in front of me.
Could be that your third eye is opening.
And so, yeah, right now with my closed eyes, everything is completely magenta.
Magenta is a kind of purple, right?
Yeah, it's pink, purple, yeah.
Yeah, it's the color of the third eye chakra. Wow.
Thank you. I think this is good enough for me for today. I think I have enough to breathe through for the rest of the evening.
Really powerful kind of inner child work, which literally rewrites your memory. Because our memories, it's true, that truly only the past exists. But the feeling of something that happens lives on with us. Yet our memories are not even black and white. So that's not to say that what you experienced wasn't real, but what you experienced was still up to perception. If something like that were to happen to you when you're maybe 40 years old and you've done a lot of inner work, it wouldn't have had that effect on you. It just had a very traumatizing effect on you because of
the circumstances,
where you are developmentally, they just make a different and way bigger impact on us. And it's up to us to use our life circumstances to find out what things in our childhood left these imprints that are not serving us any longer. And a very simple way to do that is, looking for your patterns, looking for your triggers, going into the feeling, linking them to your childhood and how you were feeling then. And usually also you can simply ask your subconscious, instead of trying to find it. If that doesn't work, you can simply ask your subconscious, like, when is the first time I felt this? And also then just let it go. Maybe sit with it for a few minutes. Sit as in just let it come to you, really. And you might get a word, you might get a number, you might get a memory, but some things are either are dissociated from us, so they're still with us, but we can't remember them if they were too painful. But we may get a feeling, and we can still work with that. And if we can't do the memory rewrite, we can just soothe the feeling that comes to us and see just ask the feeling, ask the emotion. Again, you're asking your subconscious, which knows what it needs to resolve, and do these kinds of processes with yourself. And most of it is really, really just to do with soothing, validating what we felt and experienced because we were invalidated, or we were shamed, or we were sent to our rooms, or we were told we were liars, or this or that. Like, the possibilities are endless, really. Even if our parents did do a good job, maybe we needed something else and we still interpret it as a traumatic incident. That's why even kids with, the seemingly most perfect upbringings will still have things from their childhood. But yeah, of course, there's a difference between years of abuse or small little incidents, for sure. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much for guiding me.
Yeah, you can use these notes that you made today. And you can go even deeper into finding links, and you can do this process for yourself also. And if it's hard, you can ask a friend simply to hold space for you, because it's not, in the end, it's not that hard. All you're doing really is tuning into the feeling, really letting yourself feel as honestly, as openly as possible, making the feeling worse Because if it happened a year ago, yeah, okay, now you don't feel so bad about it anymore, but it's still stored. So for the time being, you really try and recall the feeling as good as you can. And then stay with it. Lotte, is there something you would like to share? We don't have super long, but...
How, one quick question. Like if you say, like, ask a friend to hold space, how would you describe that concept? Because I'm not super clear on it.
Yeah, so you would ask a friend, like, hey, there's this process that I want to do, and it has mostly to do with me feeling and remembering something. And it helps if you can sometimes ask me questions. And the questions can be really simple. So if you, for example, like what Simona just did, said, okay, I remember there was confusion and overly sense of responsibility. And, all I asked really was like, okay, go deeper into the feeling. Anxiety also. It's like just tune into those feelings. So even someone sitting there with you can help you make you feel safe to go deeper into it. So make sure that it's someone that you're not afraid of crying in front, for example, or shouting. If there's no one that you feel comfortable with that, then it might be better to do on your own. But given the nature of this work, giving ourselves what didn't happen at those ages, no one held space for us. And it's really good to learn how to do this for yourself. And it's also really important to learn that it's important for us that others hold space for us, which can be a simple process. So you basically tell them all you have to do is be present there. And maybe if I share certain things, you can ask me to go a little bit deeper. So stay with the feeling. When is the first time you felt this? Or when do you remember this from your childhood? It's just like a guided meditation. If you're trying to meditate, it's easier to put on a tape or have someone else do the guiding than you guiding yourself into a guide. That's kind of all that it is. Right. And this person can then, when you retrieve, for example, the memory or like an overall kind of feeling from your childhood. Like I might have certain memories, but for me personally, I know it's kind of like more the whole thing, For them to ask, okay, recall the memory, relive the memory. Because it's one thing to just, oh yeah, I remember that. And to pronounce it with all the details, to walk someone through it. You will remember it better. You will hear things that you otherwise wouldn't catch. And then this person can ask you like, okay, what do you need? What did you need in that moment for you to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel protected? And really that can be anything. And then walk the person again through what it is that you're doing for yourself, how you're rewriting that memory. So you're basically changing the emotional charge around that.
Right.
And I usually also find when I go back into a memory and rewrite it, another element comes into play, which is, you created that memory and that trauma at that age because you were that age, because that was the only way, Now that you're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever years older, you might go back into that memory. And after a while, also kind of see like, well, yeah, I do get that was very painful. But at the same time, I also have more empathy for the other person in the story. It's not always necessary, but I usually find it kind of comes automatically anyway. I did some inner child work on my mom about not feeling validated in my emotions. And then what I also simply saw was like, well, when you're a young, single mom, it's going to be really hard. Well, it's probably for any parent to do it just right. But okay, for me, like it was extra like, whoa, my mom was like, I don't know, 24 or early 20s and mostly on her own. And like, of course. So it also changes this whole charge of feeling unloved. It's like, oh, most of these things are just misunderstanding. But if you don't go and actually give yourself what you needed in that moment, it's just more like an intellectual thing. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, they did the best they could. It's all good. But that doesn't release the emotional charge.
For me, for example, now I totally can see how my dad must have been freaking out in that situation, you know? Like, because he's like, shit, they found out. Like, he literally just got caught, and that was the first time. And then he, you know? So he must have been freaking the shit out of what's going to come next, and divorce and kids. And so that, you know, it's just something that I never paid attention to. I was very focused on my own anxiety. But I guess it's also something that I got from him, because he must have been panicking on the inside. So
yeah, we never have to necessarily excuse or condone this behavior, but to understand, to empathize, that can already be so healing. Empathizing with someone is not the same as condoning what they did. It's just like completely, people really just don't understand. Like forgiveness has more to do with not like, okay, everything was peachy, but like, all right, at least I understand where you were coming from, you know? Yeah. How do you feel now, Simona? Like, how does your body and your mind and everything feel, your heart?
I'm in general super tired, so I'm going to go sleep right after this because I'm in Helsinki and I was here on a conference and I had an event yesterday, so just really busy. But in general, yeah, as I said, for me, just as I closed my eyes, normally I only see like a small pink or purple dot in front of myself, and now it was just like explosion of color. So that's that always feels very nice when that happens. Gives a lot of lightness.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to see how it's going to feel for you today, next few days. There might be some integration wanting to happen. So pay a little extra attention to yourself and to your needs.
What do you mean with integration?
Well, when we do this kind of work, we literally shift something really big from our past. We release something, but sometimes in order for the energies to rebalance or for our mind to rebalance or for, you know, for our system to make sense of it, we may need to eat a bit more, we may need to sleep a bit more, we may need to reach out to a friend and do some talking, do some extra journaling or meditating. Just tune into yourself a little bit extra the next few days.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, guys. If no one has any further questions, then that's it for today.
Thank you very much. That's it from my side.
I would love it if you guys go deeper into this exercise that we did during class, and then Lotte, maybe we can spend some time at the beginning next week to do a similar procedure. Like I'm about to cut off your leg or something. I'll try not to. Right. Good night, girls.
Good night. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good luck, Simona.
Thanks. Bye.